Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. In today's video, I am sharing several ways to use Simon Hurley's stamping foam. I'll be sharing ways to use the original stamping foam and the Heart die cut stamping foam. Plus, I'll share different mediums and techniques. So let's jump right in, try out some stamping foam techniques, and make a few cards. The original stamping foam is 4 pieces of rectangular foam in a pack. They are sized at 3 1/4 by 4 1/4, and you could see you could use them vertically or horizontally. The die cut heart stamping foam is 4 1/2 by 5 3/4, and so you can see it is definitely larger than the original stamping foam. The die cut heart stamping foam, the heart pops out, so you can use the background piece with the heart open, or you can use the positive piece of the heart, or both together. And I'll share a little bit of all of these in this video. So the first technique that I want to share is that these stamping foams can be used as solid images. So I am using the positive piece of the die cut heart stamping foam, and I am pressing a couple of different colors of Distress Oxide ink right on top. I'm going to start with Kitsch Flamingo. I'm going to add a little bit of picked raspberry, and then I'm going to put a little bit of worn lipstick on there. And the reason that I'm not just swiping the color and completely covering it is because I want you to be able to see all 3 colors when we use this heart to make an impression. So I am going to just spritz it with just a teeny tiny bit of water from pretty far away using my Distress sprayer. So I just want to get a hint of water on there so that you can see what a mostly dry impression looks like first. And I'm going to press that heart down really well onto a piece of white cardstock. I'm not using watercolor cardstock because I'm not using much water today. So look at how great that looks. You get to see all the colors. There is a little bit of droplet effect because of the Distress Oxide, so it has that oxidation there. But what you can also do is really get that stamping foam wet, and then I like to put the cardstock on top so that I don't have to flip the stamping foam over and get droplets on the cardstock. I just flip the cardstock over and press it, and that gives you this really almost watercolor blurred droplet effect that looks completely different than the first one, where it is a much more drier impression and you can see kind of the texture of the foam even. Both of these are beautiful. I love that you can get both effects from it. So now I'm going to use a rainbow of Simon Hurley inks, and I'm just going to cover up the original stamping foam with lines of colors. And of course, I'm going to do a rainbow. So I have the red ink, which is called Love Struck, and the orange is Roar, the yellow is Shooting Star, the green is Viper, and the blue is No Diving. So I have all the colors of the rainbow here except for the purple, and I am just going to again just spritz that, just a quick spritz from pretty high up, just to get those colors not so dry on that stamping foam, because while you're moving down the rainbow, the colors are drying up at the top. And I'm going to press this down on a piece of A2 white cardstock. Again, I'm not using watercolor cardstock, just plain old Nina 110-pound cardstock, because I'm not using a ton of water here. And check that out. I absolutely love this rainbow. Again, you can see that texture of the foam, which I think is really cool, just like the first heart. Now I'm going to spritz much more water on here, and you can see that the water is making the ink move around a little bit, and it's starting to even blend on certain areas. Again, I'm going to place the cardstock down on this rather than flip the foam over so that it doesn't drip or, just kind of make a mess of itself. And I'm just going to make sure that I press down on the entire stamping foam from behind the cardstock so that I get a great impression, and check that out. Beautiful watercolor look. So the next way that you can use the stamping foam is actually to heat it and create an impression. And the first way I'm going to do that is with clear stamps. So these stamps are from Simon Hurley's release. I have one on an acrylic block with the stems hanging off the edge because I don't really want to use the stems. I just want to use those leaves. So I heat up the block with my heat tool. And the first time I did it, I just didn't heat it enough. You want to get it like good 10 seconds. Don't burn the foam, obviously, but get it warm enough that it's pliable so that you can really press your stamp into the foam to create this really great impression. This time I'm using one color, so I am just wiping the ink pad across that stamping foam, and it just is so cool how you can just with a little spritz of water from far away create this stamped impression with the heart and the leaves inside it. Okay, I'm going to use Love Struck this time, and again, just a little spritz of water from far away, and I'm doing the spritz with the Distress Sprayer in a way that is creating a mist, not droplets, right? So if you do it slowly and kind of only halfway, you get those big droplets. If you do a quick spritz all the way, you get a nice mist. This time I'm really going to add lots of water to it and then press down on that cardstock. Again, this just creates a much more blurred kind of watercolor effect, but it is just as beautiful. So these are the three backgrounds I created with that stamped impression. Now to clean this off, just spray it with water and wipe it dry with a cloth. To get rid of the impression, just reheat the foam, and I like to flip it over and press it down like on a glass mat or a surface that is safe for heat, just to quickly get that impression heated out of it. The next technique is to use embossing folders to create those impressions. Now, I like to use the side of the embossing folder that is raised. So the side of the embossing folder that's going to end up embossing the cardstock is the one that I think is easier to use. I just open up that embossing folder and press it down onto the stamping foam after I've heated it up. And there you can see it's got that great impression. I'm going to do the same thing with a different pattern on the heart. So the background has one pattern and the heart has small hearts on it, which is a great way. I love how you can take these two apart so that you can do two different colors or two different images on there. So I am going to use Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink on the background, which is a grid embossing folder. And again, because this is so large, I felt it was easier to put the cardstock down on top of it rather than flip it over. So in this case, I didn't put that much water on it, but I just felt like it was going to be easier for me to line up as close as possible onto the cardstock the right way. And then I did add some extra water and again press some cardstock down just so you can see the difference between the slightly drier impression and then the really extra water, more like a watercolor impression. And I absolutely love both of them, honestly, and I'm going to use both of them to create cards. So I am going to heat set that a little bit just to dry anything that was still wet before I stamp the heart inside there, because I don't want to make a mess, and I tend to forget about like a little droplet of water here can actually spread into another area, make a big mess. So I did cover that one with picked raspberry, a little spritz of water on this one to really get that much cleaner impression with less water there, and I absolutely love this. I just think that's so cute as is. Now I'm going to spritz some extra water on what's left, the ink that's still on there, and this time I am just going to turn the foam over. That's why I kind of shook it a little just to make sure there were no droplets. It's easier to line up the hearts by turning the foam over onto the open space for me. So just depends on how you do it. The next way to use the stamping foam is to make an impression with a stencil. Now, I wasn't sure this was going to work because usually I press things down onto the stamping foam. For this one, I'm going to press the foam down onto the stencil. So basically, I'm going to heat it up just like I would using a stamp or using an embossing folder, but this time I'm going to flip it over and put the hot side down onto the stencil. And I did add a ton of pressure using both hands, but check this out. Instead of the hearts pressed into the foam, they are popped up, which I think is so much fun. I'm just going to add Love Struck wiped onto this whole stamping foam here, makes a bunch of red hearts, and I'm just going to lightly spritz it again, just a mist, turn it over, and I love how this turned out. So it just gives you another option of using another tool like stencils. Okay, another technique is to use a different medium like Lunar Paste. So I am going to use two of Simon Hurley's Lunar Pastes, and I'm going to use sort of a more than thin application. So not super thick, but I do want to see some texture here, and I do want to have some kind of movement going on with the Lunar Paste. So I'm covering it up with Prom Queen Lunar Paste. I just used a spatula to get that on there. And then I cleaned off the spatula and I'm just grabbing a little bit of slippery when wet and adding in a tiny bit across the heart. So I'm trying to create sort of a marbleized look or effect because slippery when wet, especially on the Prom Queen, looks gold. So it looks like gold marble through the pink on the heart, which I think is such a fun look. Okay, so I am not going to mist this at all since it's pretty thick. It's still not dry yet, and I'm just going to stamp it down. Now, the only thing here is you have to be careful because it will slide because I have so much of it on there. So I didn't get maybe the cleanest impression all around, but I just love the look of it. So now I'm going to use some Prom Queen with a blending brush, which our crafty friend here, Michelle, said that a crafty friend on Simon's YouTube channel shared was a great way to apply the Lunar Paste, and it definitely is. So I'm going to stamp that down after I've misted it with a little bit of water just because it was so thin it was drying, and that's just another way to use that Lunar Paste. So now that we have a bunch of these backgrounds created with the stamping foam, let's turn some of them into cards. I'm going to use Thermoweb's new Pixie tape, which is a great tape to hold stencils in place, to hold dies in place, and many more things. But for now, I'm going to tape off the rainbow background that we created, and I'm laying the tiny heart stencil on top, but I just want to make sure I mask off the sides because I only want color where there's already color. So I'm going to use the same ink colors on top of the stamped foam ink colors. So I have a little bit of Love Struck at the top here, and everything else on the side will be completely masked off. Now I'm using Shooting Star, and the reason that I jumped to yellow is because I didn't have enough domed foam blenders, and so I'm sharing the yellow and the orange on one domed foam blender there. Then I have Viper, and then last Snow Diving, which is such a great blue. And then these tapes are really easy to peel off. You could see I used a lot of pressure to hold them down at first, but then once they're set, they're really easy to peel off and they don't tear your paper. I'm going to use some Rabbit Hole Designs anti-static powder tool because I'm using some of the sentiments from the Sketched Florals stamp set, and I love these kind of label tape sentiments that they have in that set. And so I heat embossed that with white embossing powder on black cardstock, cut down my panel so I could mat it on some black cardstock, and then popped up the sentiment on some pieces of black foam tape, and I'm gonna have that flush to the colorful edge there. This was so easy to create. I absolutely love it. Of course it's rainbow, so of course I love it. So this one, I did something a little different. I'm gonna stamp a flower from the same stamp set and a sentiment from the same stamp set right on top of that watercolor. So just make sure that's super, super dry before you did. I think I even heat set it, honestly, but just make sure that's all dry, and then you can just stamp that in black right on top. I'm going to again heat set this because I am famous for really liking the way a panel comes out, and then I flip it over to adhere it and it's still wet and something smears. So I did right this time. I heat set it so that it wouldn't smear, and then I put a ton of tape runner behind it because the panel had warped a little bit. So if you put a ton of tape runner behind a warped panel and then adhere it down to a heavyweight cardstock, it will help kind of straighten it out a little bit and keep it a little less warped. So again, just super easy, but I love those rainbows. Okay, the two hearts with the stamped impression, I ended up turning into cards really quickly. The pink one, I stamped the Love You from the same Sketched Floral stamp set in the bottom corner there, and then just matted it on some Breeze cardstock from the Stamp Market and just called that a day. Just a really cute, clean and simple, but the whole watercolor look of that heart is fun. For the red one, I stamped and heat embossed with gold embossing powder the sentiment at the top of the card and just heat set that, and I love that gold with the red. I think that's so pretty, so I matted it on some gold mirror cardstock as well. For the card with the embossing folder impressions, based basically all I did was stamp the sentiment at the bottom right hand corner of the heart. And I love how you can see the grid and the heart behind the open spaces of the letters. Really quick and easy to turn that one into a card. And for the watercolor looking solid heart, I stamped thank you, also from the same Sketch Floral stamp set, and part of a flower, not the whole stem, but just part of it. And then I'm going to mat it on some pink cardstock, and then I'm going to mat that on some black cardstock. So again, lots of clean and simple, because the hearts themselves or the stamped foam images themselves are so much fun and so much interest. I want to let them kind of steal the show. For the Lunar Paste heart, I decided to fussy cut it out. Again, this is a really simple fussy cut, so no problem there. And I'm going to stamp and heat emboss another sentiment from the same stamp set in gold embossing powder on some navy cardstock. I love the way that heat set gold looks on a navy background. So pretty. And then I'm just going to put that on some gold mirror cardstock, just showing on the edges, and then use some foam squares behind that Lunar Paste heart and pop that up. Again, very, very simple, other than the cool heart with that marbleized look. For the hearts that I made with the stencil in the stamping foam, I decided to cut it down right to the edge of the image. So I'm cutting off all of the white cardstock here and going to have it flush to that image. I'm going to use some tape runner to apply that down to some navy cardstock, and I'm just going to place it in the corner here and then cut off the excess so that I can have the border the same on all sides. And I just wasn't sure exactly how big it was because, as you all know, I don't like to measure. So I eyeball pretty much everything that I can get away with eyeballing. So here I like to use the edge of the guide and the side there to see exactly where I'm going to be cutting, and then just keep cutting until it looks about the same. Okay. And then I matted that on some pink cardstock, and I'm going to stamp a flower and a sentiment from the Sketch Floral stamp set on some navy cardstock, the same color of navy that I used as the mat. And I'm going to fussy cut out that floral. Again, if I can fussy cut it, you can fussy cut it, because I am so bad at fussy cutting. And I'm going to pop that up with some black foam squares right on the card there. And then I'm going to pop up the sentiment on the top left as well. Again, super, super simple to pull together, but I love all the interest there. Have you tried Simon Hurley Stamping Foam yet? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your favorite way to use it. If you want to see a few other cards that I made with Simon Hurley's latest release, check out that video over here. And if you love card making videos about new products and new techniques, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can be notified every time I have a new video available. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. Do you hear that? It's a pigeon that does not sound well. Sometimes we get very aggressive pigeons cooing. That one doesn't sound so good. It sounds like a machine like grinding its gears. Dude, really? Can you find another window? Someone else to harass with your odd cooing?